Hello, family. Today is a very, very important day. Today is June 19th, 2021. And the President Biden, who was President Obama's vice president, President Obama was the first black president. President Biden was his vice president. Today, Biden is president, and he nominated the first black female vice president. Not only is she the first black female president, she's the first woman vice president. And they signed a document the other day making Juneteenth today a legal holiday. Juneteenth, I'll show you what it means. Black people have been celebrating Juneteenth in different parts of the country for years. The first time I celebrated Juneteenth was in 1997 when I took my wife, my son Harry Jr., and my father. We all went on a vacation and we stopped in Texas. And the families in Texas were celebrating Juneteenth. And as you'll see later, we celebrated with a magnificent feast for Juneteenth. Now, not only is today the 19th of June, the first legal Juneteenth holiday, it's also the next day, the day before, the longest day of the year. Tomorrow, June 20th, will be the longest day of the year. And it will be exactly 6 months from the shortest day of the year. It'll also be 3 months from the beginning of fall and 3 months from the beginning of spring. So it's a very important day today. That's why you see me dressed a little cool today. Today I'm in Henderson, Nevada, right outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. The temperature today outside is 117 degrees. And that's why I had on my sunglasses and my hat and my short sleeve shirt, trying to stay as cool as possible indoors. If I go outside wearing my short sleeve shirt like this, I'll get sunburned. This will explain to you what Juneteenth is.
I'm getting notes of bubblegum and cotton candy. Dear Nat and Moby, can you tell us about Juneteenth? From Miss Safford's class. Sure. Juneteenth is short for June 19th. On that date in 1865, enslaved people in Galveston Bay, Texas learned they were free. 2,000 Union troops showed up with the news. The Civil War was over, and so was slavery in the South. The news had taken a while to reach Texas, the westernmost state in the Confederacy. Juneteenth celebrates that day, when the last enslaved people in the South were set free. The Emancipation Proclamation had made it official. That was an executive order issued by Abraham Lincoln in the middle of the Civil War. It said that all enslaved people in the states, in rebellion against the United States, shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free. Meaning, it applied to the Confederate States, but not to the slave states that stayed in the Union. That's because Lincoln wanted to keep his allies in those states happy. Slavery continued there for months after the Civil War ended. The 13th Amendment outlawed it across the land in December 1865, a half year after Juneteenth. Well, the Emancipation Proclamation was still a big step forward. For one thing, It allowed black men to enlist in the Union military. Nearly 200,000 black troops went on to fight for the freedom of their brothers and sisters. But more importantly, it placed the Union squarely on the side of freedom, which meant enslaved people could escape across Union lines, and 500,000 of them did. Every Union victory brought an expansion of freedom. In each area of the Confederacy it conquered, enslaved people were freed. But as Union troops advanced, lots of slaveholders took their operations west. Many found refuge in a place far from the fighting, Texas, until Major General Gordon Granger came to Galveston on Juneteenth. Standing on the balcony of the Confederate headquarters, he read from General Order Number 3. The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. Newly freed people danced, cried, sang, and started to make plans. Word spread quickly across Texas. 7-year-old Molly Harrell was enslaved on a plantation over 200 miles north of Galveston. She said, "Me and my mother left right off. We all walked down the road singing and shouting." If only it were that easy. Many white Southerners refused to accept black people as their equals. The most hateful began a campaign of terror, attacking and killing black people across the South. Defying these threats, black Texans observed the first anniversary of Juneteenth. Back then, it was also called Emancipation Day or Jubilee Day. They sang spirituals, ate barbecue, played games, and recited the Emancipation Proclamation, even though the threat of violence was always there. The country passed several constitutional amendments to protect the rights of black Americans. But down south, state and local authorities refused to obey these laws. Instead, they did everything they could to make black people second-class citizens. First, black Southerners were prevented from voting, so they had no influence in government. Then, laws were passed to bar black people from participating in everyday life. They couldn't eat with white people, go to the same schools, or use the same water fountains. Black citizens had to live in separate neighborhoods and could only hold lower-paying jobs. And they had to treat white people like they were superior. Try to fight it, and you risk jail time, violence, and even death. This policy of segregation or separation lasted for 100 years. Still, Juneteenth persevered. Celebrating became an act of resistance and a show of strength, and black communities got creative about making celebrations possible. Because of segregation, many public parks were off limits to black Texans, so they sometimes pooled funds to purchase their own land. In Houston, in 1872, ministers raised money to buy 10 acres, creating Emancipation Park. It became a safe place to gather on Juneteenth for decades. Smaller celebrations were held in people's homes and in churches, too. Juneteenth slowly spread through the country beginning in the 1910s. That was the start of the Great Migration, when millions of black Southerners sought a better life in the North. As people from Texas joined the migration, the holiday went with them. Then, during the 1950s and 60s, Juneteenth got even bigger. Black people connected their fight for equal rights to the fight to end slavery. Juneteenth embodied all of the pain and triumph of their shared history. Celebrations now featured parades and fireworks, street fairs and rodeos, and presentations about black heritage. Red food and red drinks symbolized the blood of the enslaved and their resilience in bondage. And in 1980, Texas declared Juneteenth a state holiday. Since then, 47 states have recognized it as a holiday or day of observance. Yeah, there's recently been a push to make it a federal holiday. That's when government workers get a paid day off, and most everyone else does too. Like we have for Independence Day. In fact, some people think of Juneteenth as America's second Independence Day. 'Cause the 4th of July only commemorates when white Americans gained independence, while Juneteenth is about when all Americans became free. Making it a federal holiday may not seem like such a big deal, but what a country chooses to honor and celebrate speaks to its core values. And freedom and equality for everyone are values I think we can all get behind. Nice! You baked a Juneteenth cake. We're not supposed to use actual red velvet. Blech.
Although a lot of black people were really happy with Biden signing the proclamation into law, otherwise making Juneteenth a federal law, some people, they thought still that wasn't enough. And they had this to say. Some people said, what is Juneteenth? And it was told to them, it's a holiday celebrated on the 19th of June to commemorate the emancipation of enslaved people. In the U.S., the holiday was first celebrated in Texas, where that date in 1865, in the aftermath of the Civil War, slaves were declared free under the terms of the 1862 Proclamation of Emancipation. Yet, under those terms were the freed slaves introduced to their history as to who they were and where they came from. Were they steered literally back to the flag of their origin, their family name, or their former nation and nationality? Due to the fact that many of our forefathers were already here before the slave trade ever existed, I continued to question as a child, what were we before we ever became slaves? I was sent to the principal's office by my teacher for asking such a question. Not everyone came here on slave ships. And of those who did via rickety crafts, where are their records? Seen as how there are records for everything else. Then maybe the celebration can be 100% complete for the many. Happy holiday to all of us who have taken the time to learn the truth, and to those who are still seeking. Now, family, I have taken the time, and my sister Juanita and I have went to the DNA, and we have the answer to those questions. I have the answer to you, for you, where you came from and how much African is in you. And it's all in my DNA under Harry Smith III. My father's name was Harry Smith Jr., and my grandfather's name was Harry Smith. My mother's name was Catherine Smith. Her maiden name was Catherine Ashley, and her father's name was Lorenzo Ashley. And here is the record of where the Smith family began. This is our Ancestry DNA story for the Smith family, starting with Harry Smith. Ancestry DNA has traced the origins of Harry from over 1,000 regions around the world. Take a look at their ethnicity, estimate, and where their ancestors may have lived hundreds of years ago. Family, 41% of us are Nigerian. 15% of us are Cameroon, Congo, and Western Bantu. 14% of us are Mali. 11% are Benin and Togo. That make us, if we add it all together, 56, 60, 70, 81% African right there. And then England, Northwestern Europe, we have 6% England in us. Remember I told you about how my great-grandmother's father was the owner of the slave plantation? That was where the English came in. Ivory Coast and Ghana were 4%. And then 3% were from Ireland. But you didn't know a lot of black people was from Ireland, did you? Wales, 2%. Scotland, 1%. Northern Africa, 1%. Senegal, 1%. Indigenous Cuba. Remember in school you learned about the triangle trade? Indigenous Cuba were 1%, which making us some of the indigenous people of Cuba by percentage. That's our DNA story. And if you want to know more, go into Ancestry DNA story for Harry Smith III. And you will see the whole story of us. My friend, my very, very good friend, Deborah Belger, she actually the one who got me and my wife together. Today being Juneteenth, she texted this to me through my Facebook this morning.
Today, so I'm gonna keep it black, but I'm gonna keep it brief. Word on the street is Juneteenth is now being recognized as a national holiday. What's that? Juneteenth, or June 19th, 1865, is the day the last of enslaved people throughout the South were notified that the Civil War had ended, the Union had won, and they were now free. Oh my God, that is so nice! Except what I believe we asked for is for y'all to stop killing us, to abolish the police, to give us reparations, to teach our babies more balanced and complete history in order to help us achieve a more desegregated version of freedom. Because we was going to celebrate anyway. We was going to do that because that's just how we are. We not new to this. We true to this. So it's giving gaslight. Black Americans everywhere are bothered because, one, this isn't what we asked for. Two, we really wish we could just be happy that this country is finally recognizing our past. But our present circumstances currently demand that we also have an attitude. Neon light. But this type of gaslighting is not new in American history when it comes to dealing with anyone that is not white, male, or both. Stop, light, pro-life legislation. Gaslighting. The creation of a model minority meant to facilitate the further degradation of black communities. Gaslighting. Da-da-da-dee-da-da. Lyndon B. Johnson telling Dr. King he couldn't prioritize the Voting Rights Act because he was focused on the war on poverty. Did poverty win the war? Because gaslighting. Hell, the way U.S. history classes have been taught since forever. Gaslighting. Everybody travel with the white under the sun, under the sun. But wait, what is gaslighting? Well, gaslighting can be a couple things. One, failing to recognize a person's reality and then vilifying them for their current circumstances. 2, being the root cause of a person's distress, and then criminalizing them for absolutely appropriate responses to that distress. Or 3, in this case, refusing to fix a problem that greatly affects a person's reality and providing them with completely unrelated solutions and or gifts. So if I'm being honest, the way we begin the story of Juneteenth is a bit of a gaslight if you ask me. Houseway! Class is in session. As the story goes, Abraham Lincoln freed enslaved people by signing the Emancipation Proclamation. And that's just a bunch of misinformation, hoopla, and white male savior rhetoric. See, what had happened was, the Union was really just tired of fighting the Confederacy at this point. The Confederacy was weaker, had less money, had less soldiers, had less resources. The North was like, why are they so good at staying alive and staying mad? And the trick was the enslaved population. Having people working for them at home, keeping households and families protected, and doing menial war-related labor allowed the Confederates to focus all of their attention on the war effort. So Lincoln said, ooh, if I take slavery, they don't stand a chance. So he issued a preliminary proclamation months before the Emancipation Proclamation and basically offered them a truce. If the Confederacy were to surrender under this truce, they could keep slavery for however long they wanted to. But fortunately for us, you know why Southerners gonna ride or die for their states' rights, okay? So when the truce didn't work, he was like, all right, bet, I'm setting all the black people in your territory free. And then I'm gonna invite them to come fight with us and see how long you last after that. So it was just a war strategy, folks. Lincoln knew the newly freed black people would run to Union camps, fight on their side, and help them win the war. So black people once again having to save the day, but also being used as pawns at the same time. This is America. So what's really real is that Abraham Lincoln was not an abolitionist. He wasn't even pro-black. My boy was just pro-end the war. But you know what? All in all, I'm glad Juneteenth is being recognized as a federal holiday. I mean, it's about damn time, because the 4th of July has always been kind of a slap in the face. This just in. Now that Juneteenth is a national holiday, millions of middle and upper class white people will now also get a day off from work, while black people who are essential workers will still have to go to work. I'm sorry. You telling me that white people are about to get a day off in celebration of our first day off? You better take your ass to work and clock out for overtime.